All right, let's start fresh and do this properly from the top. Settle in, get comfortable, maybe let the room go a little darker. This is meant to be listened to with your eyes half closed, like a story told at the edge of sleep. There is a quiet hour, late in the night, when the world seems to exhale. The streets outside fall still, the voices fade, and all that's left is the soft hum of your own breathing. In that calm, it becomes easier to imagine another time, another world, when the night was even darker and the silence even deeper. Before the bright cities, before the endless engines, before the screens and the noise, there was a world lit by firelight and candles, by simple lamps and small windows, where days moved at the pace of walking feet and turning wheels of wood. And then, like a spark touching dry kindling, everything began to change. Tonight, we're going to drift back to that turning point, to the age when smoke first rose from new-built chimneys and iron tracks cut across green fields like lines in a story still being written. This is the tale of the Industrial Revolution, told slowly, gently, like a quiet river you can float upon. You don't need to remember every name or every date. You don't have to study or think too hard. All you have to do is listen and let the images form softly in your mind as sleep begins to gather around the edges of your thoughts. If you'd like more nights like this, more journeys into old stories told in a calm and soothing way, you're welcome to come back, to listen again, to let history be your lullaby. For now, just rest. Feel the weight of the day begin to slide away as we go backward in time to a world that had no idea how much it was about to change. Long before chimneys brushed the sky and factories glowed in the dark, most people lived by the slow, patient rhythm of the land. Imagine a small English village in the early 1700s. The air smells of damp earth and smoke from small hearth fires. The houses are low and simple, their walls rough, their roofs uneven. Chickens scratch in the dirt paths. Carts creak slowly past, pulled by tired horses with gentle, blinking eyes. Fields stretch out around the village like a worn patchwork blanket, stitched together by hedges and stone walls. Life here is steady, but it is hard. Families rise with the sun and work until the light fades. Hands are always busy, sowing seeds, cutting wheat, spinning wool into yarn, weaving cloth on wooden looms that sing in a slow, repetitive rhythm. People make most of what they need themselves, or buy it from neighbors who labor just as they do. Change comes rarely, and when it does, it arrives quietly. A new tool, a different seed, a rumor from a far-off town. The world feels old, and in many ways, it has been this way for centuries. Still, even in this slow world, small ideas are beginning to flicker like sparks in the dark. In workshops and in barns, in city streets and in quiet shipyards, a few curious minds are asking quiet, dangerous questions. Could this be done faster? Could this be done better? Does work have to be this heavy, this slow, this bound to the weather and the seasons? They are not trying to reshape the world yet. They are just trying to solve small problems. But history often turns on small questions whispered at the right moment. Far to the north, coal lies buried in the dark, waiting. For centuries, it has been just another fuel dug out in small amounts to warm homes and heat iron. But deep coal mines fill with water. The deeper people dig, the wetter and more dangerous the tunnels become. Miners work in the half-dark, water seeping around their boots, their lamps throwing shivering light on the walls. The problem is simple. How do you move the water out so you can go deeper without drowning? In the early 1700s, an Englishman named Thomas Newcomen offers an answer that will, without him fully realizing it, nudge the world toward a new age. He designs a machine that uses steam to power a pump. It is big, clumsy, and a little frightening. It groans and hisses like some mechanical animal breathing in the shadows. But it works. Water is pulled out of the mines and men can dig deeper. In the flicker of lamps on whetstone, the future takes its first unsteady steps. For now, this seems like a local miracle, useful but limited. Yet the idea of a machine driven not by muscle, wind, or water, but by steam itself, begins to sink into the minds of others. One of them is James Watt, a quiet, thoughtful man who studies Newcomen's engine and sees not just what it is, but what it could become. Watt refines it, smooths its motion, makes it more efficient. The engine becomes leaner, stronger, hungrier. It wants work to do, and the world is full of work. Imagine that same gentle village again, but now add a new sound, a distant, steady churning, like a great animal breathing behind the hills. In nearby towns, tall brick buildings rise, their windows crowded together like watching eyes. These are factories, and inside them, rows of machines spin cotton and wool into thread, and thread into cloth. Where one pair of hands once worked a single loom, now dozens, even hundreds of spindles turn at once, driven by water wheels and more by steam. Step inside one of those early mills in your imagination. The air is thick with lint and dust, swirling in pale beams of light that fall from high, dirty windows. The floor trembles with the motion of gears and belts and spinning frames. The machines chatter and whir and clack, their voices overlapping into a hard, endless roar. Young faces move between them, men, even children, tired eyes watching, nimble fingers tying broken threads. Work here is faster than in the old cottages, but it is also harsher, more demanding. The machine sets the pace now, and it does not grow weary. For the owners of these new factories, the change is astonishing. What once took many hands and long weeks can now be done in days, even hours. Cloth becomes cheaper. Profits rise. Towns grow around the mills, their streets filling with workers who leave the countryside behind, hoping to trade the uncertain harvest of the fields for steady wages. Houses crowd together in narrow rows, smoke curls constantly from chimneys, and the sky above begins to turn a little darker, stained by coal. From up close, for the people living this change, it must have felt confusing, frightening, sometimes hopeful, sometimes cruel. For us, looking back from the soft safety of the present, it has a strange, dreamlike quality. It is as if the world has inhaled deeply, filling its lungs with smoke and steam, preparing to run a race it can never again step away from. The steam engine does not stay in the mines or the mills. It is too restless for that. Ingenious minds ask a new question. If steam can lift water and drive great spinning frames, what else might it move? In the early 1800s, the answer begins to take shape in iron and steel. First come strange metal carriages that crawl along rails, hissing and panting, pulling carts of coal. Then someone climbs aboard. Gradually, those carts become trains. Close your eyes for a moment and picture one of the first locomotives. It sits on a narrow track of iron bars laid across the earth. Its body is a simple cylinder, black with soot and heat. Wheels glint dully beneath it. At the front, smoke pours out in thick gray clouds that twist into the air. The engine trembles, like a living creature straining to be set free. Then, with a clank and a jerk, it begins to move. Slowly at first, then faster, and faster still, until the fields begin to blur and vanish at its sides. For people who had lived their whole lives at walking speed, this must have felt like magic. Villages that once seemed very far apart were suddenly only an hour or two away. The world shrank, its wide spaces folded in upon themselves. Goods traveled further, faster. Letters crossed entire countries in days instead of weeks. Markets grew, cities swelled. The old idea of distance, which had shaped human life since the beginning, was quietly rewritten by iron rails and steam. As trains stitched the land together, new machines reached out across the water. Shipbuilders began to fit vessels with engines so that they no longer had to bend to the will of wind and tide. Coal was shoveled into fiery mouths deep in their hulls, turning paddles and propellers that pushed them forward. Oceans, which had once been wild, slow, and uncertain, became more predictable, more measured, more tightly woven into the fabric of trade. The world's map did not change on paper, but in the minds of those who traveled and traded, it began to feel smaller, more connected, more restless. All the while, the cities grew. Imagine walking into early 19th century London or Manchester, not as a rushed visitor, but as a slow, drifting traveler in a dream. The streets are crowded with carts and carriages, with workers in simple clothes, with factory bells ringing in the distance. Smoke hangs like a gray veil over rooftops. At night, instead of just starlight and candles, gas lamps burn along the streets, turning darkness into a softer, flickering twilight. The air smells of coal and damp stone, of horses and oil, of life packed tightly together. Inside cramped homes, families share small rooms. Many have left the countryside behind, carrying with them memories of open fields and familiar paths. Now their days are ruled by clocks and whistles, by shifts and schedules. Work in the factories is long and tiring. The noise is constant, like a storm that never ends. Children as young as 8 or 9 labor beside their parents, their hands quick and thin, their shoulders already bending beneath invisible weight. No laws yet protect them. Those will come later, slowly, pushed forward by people who watch and worry and refuse to look away. The Industrial Revolution is not a gentle story. It is full of beauty and danger, of invention and exhaustion, of bright new hopes and deep new sorrows. It gave the world more goods, more food, more medicines, more chances to travel and learn. It also filled the air and rivers with smoke and filth, sharpened the line between rich and poor, and turned millions of people into cogs in an enormous, grinding machine. Progress in this age is not a clean word. It is smudged with coal dust and sweat. And yet, woven through the hard edges, there is another quiet thread: the rise of new voices. As factories grow, so do movements of workers who begin to see themselves not as scattered individuals, but as many hands joined together. They form unions. They sign petitions. They march through the streets, slow and steady, asking not for miracles, but for fairness. Shorter hours, safer machines, the chance for children to go to school instead of the spinning floor. Reformers write books, politicians debate, and slowly, painfully, the laws begin to shift. Under gaslit lamps, poets and writers try to make sense of what is happening. Painters stand at the edge of smoky cities and try to capture the raw, strange beauty of this new world, the glow of furnaces at night, the sharp lines of bridges and mills, the thousands of figures streaming through the streets like rivers of cloth and bone. Some see great promise. Others see only loss. Most feel both at once, and so they write with a kind of aching wonder. From Britain, the wave of change rolls outward. First across Europe, then to North America, then slowly, unevenly into many corners of the world. Wherever coal and iron, water and labor come together, the pattern repeats itself. Small workshops grow into factories, villages swell into cities, forests are cut, rivers are tamed, and railroads extend like iron fingers over the land. Older ways of life bend, crack, or vanish. New ones take their place, sometimes better, often harsher, always faster. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear the sound of that century-changing speed. The click of telegraph keys sending messages down wires stretched over long distances, the ticking of new clocks in factories and stations, the whistle of trains as they cross valleys and climb hills. Time itself feels different. Instead of being measured just in seasons and harvests, it is now tracked in minutes and seconds. A missed train, a lost hour, can change a day's work, a shipment, a deal. The world has entered a race with no clear finish line. As you rest here now, with your body gently sinking into softness, it may be strange to think that so much of the life around you, the roads you travel, the lights you switch on, the schedule of your days, is shaped by that long-ago storm of change. The electricity in your walls, the phone in your hand, the plane that crosses the sky, all of it, in a distant way, grows from the same roots, from steam engines heaving in dark mines, from iron rails laid across the soil, from the restless curiosity of people who wondered if life could be moved by machines. But tonight, you don't need to feel the weight of all that. You don't have to judge the past or fix the future. You are just a traveler passing through an old story, watching it unfold from a safe and quiet distance. You can see the faces of the workers and inventors, the mill girls and mine boys, the engineers and dreamers, and then let them fade again, like figures in a lantern show slowly dimming as the light runs out. The smoke from the chimneys begins to thin in your mind. The roar of the factories grows softer, like a storm moving far away across the sea. The clatter of wheels on rails turns into a distant rhythm, like a heartbeat muffled by time. One by one, the gas lamps along the city streets wink out until only stars remain, shining above the soot-stained roofs. Even the restless engines seem to grow tired and still. You can imagine walking away from the city now, out along a quiet road where the houses grow fewer and the air grows clearer. Behind you, the lights flicker like a low, earthly constellation. Ahead, the countryside returns, dark fields, sleeping trees, a river glinting faintly in the moonlight. The world that came before the Industrial Revolution is still there, in the quiet spaces, in the shadow of farmhouses, in the beat of human hearts that have always longed for rest after toil. In the end, the story of the Industrial Revolution is not just about machines and factories. It is about people, their hopes, their fears, their bright ideas and heavy burdens. It is about how a few sparks of invention, fanned by need and ambition, can set whole landscapes alight with change. It is about how those changes can bring both comfort and cost, both wonder and worry. And it is about how, no matter how loud the engines roar, there is always, somewhere, a place of stillness where a single person can lie down, close their eyes, and let the noise fall away. As you listen to the last echoes of this story, feel your own breathing slow and deepen. The past is gently closing its doors for tonight. The factories dim. The trains rest in their silent stations. The ships drift quietly in their harbors. The coal lies cooling in the dark. History, like you, is allowed to sleep. You are here, safe in this moment, wrapped in the soft hush of now. The long, complicated journey from fields to factories, from steam to light, can be set aside. You have walked far enough for one night. Let your thoughts grow quieter. Let the images of chimneys and railways fade into mist. Let the steady rhythm of your heart be the only engine you need. And as you drift slowly toward sleep, remember, the world has turned through fire and smoke and iron to bring you here, to this simple, gentle act of resting. You have nothing more to do. The story can wait. The machines can wait. For now, there is only you, the darkness, and the soft unfolding of a night that belongs entirely to your dreams. There is a moment in history when the world seems to hold its breath. The fields are still. The rivers run in their ancient paths. Horses pull carts along muddy roads, and the sound of footsteps on cobblestone is the loudest rhythm in a village street. And then, somewhere in that familiar silence, a new sound begins to grow. A low churning, a steady hiss, a heartbeat made of metal and steam. It is here, in this strange new music, that the second chapter of our story begins, with sparks in the smoke, and the people who dared to imagine that the world itself could be powered by fire. For a long time, work had been tied to the strength of the body, to the steady pull of a horse, to the patient turning of a water wheel, to the hands of men, women, and children who spun, hammered, carved, and carried from sunrise to sunset. Life moved no faster than a person could walk, no heavier than a person could lift. But quietly, in the shadows of coal mines and in the damp corners of workshops, a different dream began to take shape. What if power could come from something else? Something that did not tire, did not sleep, did not hunger? Something that could turn wheels and lift weights simply because heat met water and refused to rest. In the early 1700s, in the coal fields of Britain, this question was more than a dream. It was a problem that needed solving. Coal mines were filling with water, drowning tunnels, and cutting off the precious fuel that warmed homes and fired furnaces. Men baled water with buckets. Pumps strained and failed. It was slow, dangerous work. And then came a rough, early answer, a machine built by a man named Thomas Newcomen. It wheezed and clanked and wasted enormous amounts of energy, but in its noisy struggle there was something new. A beam moved. A piston rose and fell. Steam, once the ghostly breath that floated from a pot of boiling water, now pushed iron and wood with enough strength to clear the flooded mines. The machine was clumsy, imperfect, and yet, in its heavy steps, the world took a quiet stride toward the future. Years later, another mind would cross paths with this imperfect engine. A Scotsman named James Watt, with observant eyes and a restless curiosity, studied the Newcomen engine and heard, in its chaos, the possibility of a steadier song. He noticed where it lost strength, where heat escaped, where water cooled at the wrong time. He understood that if steam could be tamed, if it could be used more wisely, it could become something far more than a desperate tool for mines. It could be a new kind of heart, a beating core for factories, ships, and machines not yet imagined. Watt's improvements were quiet things on paper at first, changes in how steam was cooled, how pressure was managed, how parts were linked. But when his redesigned engines began to move, the difference was unmistakable. They were stronger, more efficient, more reliable. They could run longer and harder and did not need to be hidden deep below the ground. They could be brought into the open world. In workshops and counting houses, in taverns and over dinner tables, people began to talk about this new power. Not all of them understood the details, but they felt the shift. If a machine could turn a pump, then it could also turn a wheel. If it could turn a wheel, it could spin thread. If it could spin thread, it could change the lives of weavers and spinners, of merchants and farmers, of families in towns and villages miles away. Ideas began to drift, like sparks carried on the wind, from one mind to the next. Some of these sparks landed in the hands of inventors who did not belong to grand families or ancient titles, but who carried a fierce, stubborn belief that things could be done differently. In the damp air of English textile towns, another transformation had already begun. For centuries, spinning and weaving had been homebound tasks. Wool and cotton were carried to small cottages where families worked by lamplight, spinning fibers into thread and weaving that thread into cloth, inch by careful inch. Mothers, fathers, and children sat together, hands moving in a rhythm older than memory. The work was slow, intimate, and tiring. But demand was rising. More people wanted more cloth, more clothing, more of the soft comfort that fabric could bring. The old ways could not keep up. It was in this moment that men like James Hargreaves, Richard Arkwright, and Samuel Crompton stepped forward, each adding their own stroke to the unfolding story. Hargreaves, a humble weaver, is said to have watched a spinning wheel tip over and noticed that the spindle still turned. From this simple accident, or so the story goes, his mind caught that drifting spark. Why should one wheel spin only one thread? Why not several at once? The machine he built, called the spinning jenny, allowed a single worker to spin many threads together, fingers guiding multiple spindles instead of just one. For some, it was a marvel. For others, it was a threat. If one person could now do the work of many, what would become of those whose only skill was to spin? Arkwright, a barber's son with an eye for opportunity, took things further. He understood that these new spinning machines could become part of something even larger if they were driven not by human hands, but by a steady, dependable power. First, he turned to water. He built a factory by a flowing river, letting the current turn great wheels that then turned gears and shafts inside a tall stone building. The air there was thick with lint, the clatter of machinery echoing off the walls in a ceaseless metallic pulse. Dozens of workers, many of them children, tended rows of machines that spun cotton into thread faster than any village of cottages could ever match. In those early factories, or mills as they were often called, something profound was taking shape. For the first time, large groups of people came together to work under one roof, guided by the timing of machines rather than the cycle of the sun. Hours grew long. Morning bells called them in. Evening bells sent them away. The work was often harsh and exhausting, but the wages, however small, drew families in from the countryside. Fields emptied slowly. Towns thickened. Smoke rose in wider columns against the sky. When steam engines finally entered these mills, the change grew even more dramatic. No longer limited to rivers and seasons, factories could be built almost anywhere. A steam engine turning in a courtyard could power looms and spindles all day long, winter or summer, wet or dry. Coal-fed fires heated water in iron boilers until the steam inside pressed and pushed with invisible strength. This force, channeled through iron rods and gears, became motion. Regular, relentless motion. The kind that never yawned, never slowed, never asked for rest. It wasn't just textiles that felt the touch of this new power. Ironworkers, who had for centuries smelted ore in small, smoky furnaces, felt it as well. In the beginning, they burned charcoal made from wood, a slow and limited fuel. Forests paid the price, shrinking under the growing hunger for metal. Then came a key change, the shift to coal and to a processed form of coal called coke, which burned hotter and more steadily. With this, furnaces could grow taller and stronger. More iron could be smelted. More tools, more rails, more machines could be born. The fire inside the furnace glowed brighter, and with it, the possibilities. These separate innovations, steam engines in the mines, spinning machines in the mills, improved furnaces in the ironworks, might have remained scattered wonders, isolated in their own corners of the land. But the Industrial Revolution was not built on scattered sparks. It was built on connections. Each invention fed the next. More iron meant more strong parts for engines. Better engines meant more power for factories. More cloth meant more trade and more ships to carry goods across oceans. And as trade grew, so did the hunger for speed. Along the rough roads of Britain, horses strained to pull carts loaded with coal and cotton, grain and goods. The roads, often little more than rutted tracks, turned to deep mud in the rain. Journeys dragged on, slow and miserable. Entrepreneurs tried to improve the roads with stones carefully laid and packed, but even the best road had limits. A horse could only do so much. Once again, the question rose, could steam help here too? Could the same invisible power that turned factory wheels also pull wagons and people across the land? At first, steam engines crept onto rails in a modest way, deep inside the coal fields. Heavy wagons filled with coal sat on simple iron tracks, pulled along by stationary engines that wound ropes and chains. It was a small, practical solution, nothing that looked like the sweeping romance of a railway station. Yet even in these rough, hidden places, another spark was waiting. Engineers began to dream of engines that did not stand still, but moved. Engines that could roll forward on their own wheels, carrying their fires with them, pulling trains of carriages behind. This dream would soon give birth to the railway age, but in this chapter, we are still at the moment where sparks are gathering, where the air is thick with smoke and questions, and where every new engine, every humming loom, every glowing furnace seems to whisper the same idea. The old limits are no longer fixed. Inside the growing cities, the changes could be felt in everyday life. Streets that once echoed with the clop of hooves began to ring with the rumble of carts heavy with factory goods. Shop windows filled with cheaper cloth, brighter colors, and new kinds of items that only large-scale manufacturing could provide. People who once made most of what they needed at home now bought more from markets and shops. A new kind of consumer world, young and imperfect, began to rise from the mist of tradition. Yet, beneath the shining thread of progress, there were shadows that could not be ignored. In the dim light of factories, children moved between machines that towered over them, fingers quick but fragile. Women stood for hours beside roaring looms, eyes stung by dust, ears battered by noise. Men shoveled coal, their lungs filling slowly with the fine black powder that settled in every crease of clothing and skin. In small rented rooms near the mills, families squeezed together, the air thick, the walls damp, the streets outside crowded and unclean. For them, the sparks of industry were not distant wonders. They were the reason for aching backs and bleary eyes. Still, even in these harsh conditions, a strange, uneasy hope flickered. The steady wage, however small, allowed some to imagine a different future for their children. A boy who worked in a mill might, in time, learn a skilled trade. A girl who wound bobbins might become a supervisor or save a little money for something of her own. Schools and churches began to appear near the factories, sometimes built by the owners themselves, who were not all cold or cruel, but as trapped in this new system as the workers they employed. Some truly believed they were helping to lift people from rural poverty into a more modern, promising age. Others saw only profit. Human hearts, as always, were complicated. In the middle of all this, the inventors and engineers kept thinking, kept experimenting, kept failing and trying again. They were not all geniuses. Many were craftsmen, tinkerers, people with calloused hands and stubborn minds. Some of their ideas never left the workshop. Some broke, some exploded, some were laughed at and forgotten. But enough succeeded to push the world forward, step by step. The story of the Industrial Revolution is often told as a tale of great men and great machines. But behind every famous name there were countless others, unrecorded mechanics, nameless laborers, quiet assistants, each adding a small piece to a vast unfolding puzzle. If you could stand, just for a moment, in the twilight of an early industrial town, you would feel this mix of awe and unease. The sky would be lined with chimneys, thin threads of smoke weaving together into a hazy veil. The river would carry not only water, but the reflection of brick mills and iron bridges. The air would taste faintly of coal. You would hear the steady thump of engines, the clatter of machines, the shouts of workers changing shifts. And yet, beyond the noise, you might also hear something softer, the quiet realization that this was a beginning, not an end. Because what was happening in Britain did not stay in Britain. News, goods, and ideas traveled across seas and borders. Merchants visited from distant countries and returned home with stories of strange new machines. Drawings crossed oceans. Skilled workers emigrated, carrying their knowledge with them. Slowly, factories began to rise in other lands, each shaped by local needs, local politics, and local dreams, but all connected to the same core idea: that human labor could be multiplied by harnessing new forms of power. And so, in the rising smoke and whir of turning gears, this chapter draws to a gentle close. We leave behind the early inventors, the first factory towns, the glowing furnaces, the clumsy engines groaning under their own weight. We leave them standing at the edge of a new world, half aware of what they have started, unaware of how far their sparks will travel. For now, the engines still chug and sigh, the factories still buzz, and the chimneys still paint dark strokes against a pale sky. The revolution is unfolding, not yet complete, like a great machine still being assembled. As you breathe slowly, in and out, you might picture those first beams of iron lifting and falling, those first pistons sliding in their cylinders, that first spinning frame whirring to life under the hand of a cautious worker. Think of how small each invention seemed at the moment of its birth, and how enormous its echo became. History is full of such echoes, carried forward by time, changing the lives of people who will never know the names of those who first struck the spark. Ahead, in the chapters to come, those sparks will leap from factories to railways, from iron tracks to crowded cities, from soot-darkened neighborhoods to shining halls of exhibition, where nations will proudly display their machines like treasures. But for now, let the sounds of those early engines fade softly in your mind, like distant thunder rolling away over the hills. The world is turning faster, yes, but here, in this quiet moment, you are allowed to slow down, to simply listen to the story of how it all began, in smoke and fire and the quiet dreams of restless, determined hearts. There is a soft hush that falls over the world at night, when the glow of distant cities fades into a gentle blur and the roads grow quiet. In that stillness, it can be hard to imagine a time when distance felt enormous, when the space between towns seemed wide and slow and heavy, like a long hill that never quite ended. Yet there was such a time, not so long ago, when journeys were measured in days and weeks, and the horizon felt like a faraway promise instead of a morning commute. And then, almost suddenly, iron lines began to spread across the earth like dark threads, stitching places together that had never truly touched before. This is the story of those iron roads and of the restless cities that grew beside them, breathing in steam and breathing out change. For centuries, the speed of life was bound to the rhythm of hooves and the roll of wooden wheels. A letter might take weeks to arrive. A traveler might leave home knowing they would not return until the seasons had shifted. People lived and died within a few miles of the place they were born, and for many, the edge of the world was no farther than the last church tower or distant hill their eyes could see. The map of life was small and slow and familiar, but deep beneath the fields, men had begun to cut into the dark seams of coal. In smoky workshops, iron was being melted, shaped, and tested. And somewhere in that mix of soot, fire, and curiosity, a simple but astonishing thought took shape. What if steam, the same invisible force hissing from kettles and engines, could carry people as easily as it carried pistons and gears? The first railways did not begin with grand stations or polished carriages. They began in the dirt and in the dark, running from mines to harbors along short, rough tracks of wood and iron. Carts loaded with coal rattled along them, pulled by horses that knew the path by heart. These early lines were practical, quiet revolutions, built not to impress, but to move weight more easily. Yet even in those simple tracks, there was a hint of something larger, a whisper that the earth itself was becoming easier to cross. When inventors like George Stephenson looked at these tracks, they did not just see a way to move coal. They saw a road that did not wear out in the rain, a path that did not get tired, a line along which a machine, once started, might run and run and run. The steam engine, which had already begun to pump water from mines and turn factory wheels, now found a new companion, the iron rail. Together, they formed a kind of promise. The engine could provide the power, the rails could provide the direction, and between them, they could create something the world had never seen before, a land-bound ship, able to carry dozens, even hundreds, of people faster than any horse could run, hour after hour, day after day. When Stephenson's locomotive, the Rocket, screamed and hissed along the track during its famous trials in 1829, people who watched felt two things at once: fear at the sight of this iron beast breathing smoke and fire, and wonder at the thought that this clattering creature might drag time itself forward. At first, the idea of traveling by train felt almost frightening. Some believed the human body was not meant to move so quickly on land. They worried that organs might fail, that minds might falter, that the air itself would become unbreathable at such terrible speeds as 30 or 40 kilometers an hour. Villagers gathered near the tracks just to watch. Farmers led their children to the embankments, pointing at the trembling lines of iron and the strange new signal posts, waiting for the moment when the quiet morning would be split by a distant, growing roar. And then, out of a smear of smoke on the horizon, the train would appear black, shining, trembling with speed. It was as if a piece of the future had been set loose across the countryside. The railways did more than shorten journeys. They began to shrink the meaning of distance itself. A trip that once took 3 days by carriage could now be done in a few hours. Markets that had only sold local grain, local wool, local vegetables could suddenly fill their stalls with goods from faraway counties and ports. Fresh fish caught at dawn could be eaten in a city by midday, carried in the cool morning air along rattling wagons of steel. Newspapers printed in London before sunrise could be read that same afternoon in towns that had once felt lonely and far behind. Time, which had once been loosely kept by church bells and local habits, began to tighten and align as railways needed precise timetables and synchronized clocks. Even the hours of the day began to follow the rhythm of the trains. Along these iron roads, cities started to change. Towns that lay beside important rail lines grew busier, louder, more crowded. New stations rose like stone cathedrals of movement, their roofs made of iron ribs and glass skin, letting light pour down on platforms buzzing with travelers. The old village quiet, broken only by church bells and the clatter of carts, now shared space with the whistle of engines and the echo of announcements. People who had never before seen the sea could buy a ticket and ride there for a day. Workers from the countryside could travel into growing industrial cities in search of wages. The beat of their lives now matched to the arrivals and departures of trains. Inside the cities, the railways carved their own paths. Great viaducts strode across rivers and streets. Tunnels were driven under hills and through layers of rock that had slept undisturbed for millions of years. Goods stations and freight yards spread like metal forests at the edges of urban life, piled with crates and barrels, timber and coal, grain and cloth. At night, lamps flickered along the tracks, and the silhouettes of shunting engines moved like slow, breathing shadows. The city and the railway fed each other. The more the trains brought in workers, customers, raw materials, the more the city swelled. And the larger the city became, the more it needed the railway to bring food, fuel, and everything else that kept its heart beating. For ordinary people, the railway opened a door that had never truly existed before. Now, a young man from a rural village could travel to a distant city and start a life that did not resemble his parents' or grandparents' at all. A woman might visit relatives in another region, returning home with new ideas, new clothes, new ways of thinking about the world. Couples could take day trips, families could see new landscapes, children could watch the scenery blur past from a carriage window, their faces pressed to the glass as hedges and fields, rivers and church spires slid away behind them. The world no longer felt endless and unreachable. It felt, for the first time, like something you could cross if you simply bought a ticket and stepped aboard. Yet the coming of the iron roads was not gentle for everyone. As rail lines cut through farmland and old neighborhoods, some homes were demolished, some fields sliced in two, some quiet paths closed forever. Farmers watched as surveyors paced out lines across their land, and then as the ground was torn open for embankments and cuttings. Animals that once roamed open meadows now lived in the shadow of bridges and passing trains. In some places, old coaching inns lost their trade and slowly faded away, their stables quiet, their yards empty, no longer needed now that a flying machine on wheels could carry people far faster than any stagecoach. The cities that grew around the railways could be harsh as well as hopeful. Crowds of newcomers poured in, drawn by work in factories and warehouses. Streets near stations filled with lodging houses, cheap taverns, and endless streams of tired faces. Smoke from locomotives mingled with the soot from chimneys, thickening the air. Noise became a constant companion, the screech of wheels on rails, the clank of couplings, the shouts of porters, the rumble of carriages over points and junctions. For those living close to the tracks, the romance of train travel might have been harder to feel in the middle of the night, when yet another freight train rattled by, shaking walls and disturbing dreams. And yet, in spite of the disruption, something deeply human grew along these iron paths: connection. Letters traveled faster. News moved quickly. A disaster in one part of a country could be answered with help from another. Ideas about politics, about science, about art and rights and change spread along the lines with the speed of steel wheels. A person could live in one city, work in another, and visit family in a third, all within a single week. The world felt less like a patchwork of isolated places and more like a single, breathing network of towns and people bound together by rails. Politicians and kings, merchants and farmers, all began to see that whoever controlled the railways controlled the flow of life itself. Governments invested money. Businessmen planned ambitious routes, sometimes drawing bold lines on maps that cut through mountains and wilderness. Engineers answered with tunnels that took years to dig and bridges that seemed to hang in the air. The work was dangerous, and many laborers paid with their lives, crushed by rockfalls, swept away by sudden floods, or worn down by long, brutal days. Still, the tracks crept forward, mile by mile, until countries that once took months to cross could be spanned in days. As railways spread beyond Britain to Europe, to North America, to India, to Africa, Asia, and beyond, they carried both wonders and wounds with them. In some places, they brought medicine, food, and opportunity. In others, they became tools of empires, lines of steel laid across lands that were not truly theirs, binding distant colonies to distant capitals. Goods flowed outward, wealth flowed inward, and often, the people who lived along those tracks found that their lives were being drawn into systems they did not choose. The iron roads that shrank distances also deepened some divides, making it easier for power to reach farther, faster, and more firmly than ever before. Still, if you could stand at a quiet country station in those years, early in the age of steam, you might feel something almost magical in the air. The platform would smell faintly of coal and oil. The rails, polished to a dull shine, would hum softly under your feet as a train approached from far away. A child might clutch a small bundle of belongings, heart pounding with both fear and excitement, ready to leave home for the first time. An old couple might stand together, fingers intertwined, about to see grandchildren who lived in a distant town. Around them, strangers would share brief, gentle conversations, all of them drawn into the same thin slice of time, waiting for the same arrival. When the engine finally swept into view, steam billowing, pistons pumping, it brought more than passengers and freight. It brought a new feeling about what was possible. The earth no longer seemed quite so wide. A sense of restlessness seeped into every corner of life. If a train could carry you to another city in a day, then why not move there? Why not seek better work, a different future, a new beginning? City streets filled with people who had followed that question. Each step they took echoing the click and clatter of the wheels that had brought them there. At night, when the last trains of the day slipped along the tracks beneath a blanket of stars, the countryside glimmered with distant signals and station lamps. In city centers, great terminals glowed like lanterns, steel arches holding up roofs under which thousands of stories passed each other without ever meeting. Somewhere, a signalman in a lonely box would lean forward, oil lamp beside him, listening for the faint vibration of an approaching train. Somewhere else, a porter would close his eyes for a moment between arrivals, his ears still full of the day's constant swirl of voices and footsteps. Lying here now, you might picture those iron roads not as cold lines of metal, but as living veins pulsing with the movement of hopes and fears, of joy and sorrow. Every ticket sold was a decision. Every journey taken was a small act of courage, a step away from what was known toward something unknown. The Industrial Revolution had begun with machines in workshops and factories, but with the coming of the railways, it began to move through people's hearts and lives, changing how they saw space, time, and their own place in the world. In the gentle quiet of this moment, it's easy to forget how strange and powerful that first shift must have felt. To wake in a village where no one had ever left, and to go to sleep in a world where anyone with a few coins and some bravery could cross mountains and rivers on ribbons of steel. The iron roads turned the map of the world into something flexible, almost soft, bending days into hours, bending far into near. And in the shadows of the stations and the glow of the new, restless cities, humanity began to live at a new speed, carried forward by engines that never got tired, along tracks that seemed to promise there was always somewhere else to go. As the last trains of that long-ago day vanish into the dark, their red lights fading like distant embers, we leave them to their journey. The steam will drift away into the night sky. The tracks will cool in the moonlight, and in the quiet that returns, you can still feel the echo of what they changed, a world where distance once kept people apart, slowly becoming a world where iron roads and restless cities drew them closer together, one journey at a time. Night has a way of shrinking the world. Streets that seemed wide in daylight become narrow tunnels of shadow. The noise of the day falls away until only a few distant sounds remain. A car passing, a voice far off, maybe the quiet hum of a machine nearby. Lying there, in that small pool of stillness, it's hard to imagine just how big the world once felt to the people who tried to cross it. Oceans were not blue shapes on a map back then. They were vast, dangerous mysteries. A voyage could swallow months of a person's life, and there was never a promise they would return. And yet, in the age of coal and iron, even the oceans began to bend to steam. Out in the darkness of the 19th century seas, new silhouettes appeared on the horizon. Where once tall wooden ships with billowing white sails had drifted slowly across the waves, now darker shapes moved with a strange, stubborn purpose. Thick metal hulls, shorter masts, and above them, a smokestack, exhaling a steady plume of coal-black smoke into the sky. These were the steamships, the iron companions to the railways on land, and together they would pull the continents into a tighter, faster, more tangled embrace. Beneath the stars, a steamship felt like its own floating world. On deck, the night wind smelled of salt and coal smoke. Deep below, unseen but always heard, the engines thudded and turned, metal pistons beating like a heavy heart. Instead of waiting for a friendly wind, the ship pushed forward at its own chosen pace, following schedules and timetables that would have seemed almost magical just a generation before. A journey that once depended on luck, on wind and weather, began to follow the tick of a clock. But like so many things born in the age of industry, that new power came with a shadow. Steam across the oceans did not only carry mail and hopeful travelers, it carried empires. As factories in Britain, then Europe, then North America roared to life, they demanded more and more of the world. More cotton, More rubber, more tea and sugar, more metals pulled from deep underground. The old sailing routes, once used for slow, uncertain trade, became busy highways of iron and steam. Colonizing powers carved lines onto maps far from their own shores, claiming lands and lives that were not theirs to take. Steam-powered ships made these ambitions easier to reach and harder to resist. In ports from Bombay to Shanghai, from Cape Town to Kingston, the arrival of a steamer became a familiar sight. The gray smoke on the horizon, the sharp blast of a whistle, the shouts of dock workers as ropes were thrown and heavy cargo was winched ashore. Bales of raw cotton, crates of tea, barrels of sugar, bundles of rubber, and, increasingly, human beings on the move, not as conquerors or owners, but as labor. Because the Industrial Revolution did not only depend on coal and iron, it depended on people. Long before the age of iron ships, European wealth had been built in part on the brutal transatlantic slave trade. Millions of African men, women and children kidnapped, chained, and forced across the ocean in horrific conditions to work on plantations in the Americas. That system was already centuries old when steam began to spread. Over time, growing moral outrage, resistance from the enslaved themselves, and political battles led to abolition laws in many places. On paper, the trade ended. In reality, the hunger for cheap labor did not disappear. It simply changed shape. Where enslaved people had once been forced onto wooden sailing ships, now indentured laborers were signed to harsh contracts and carried on steamers from India, China, and other parts of Asia to faraway colonies, to the Caribbean, to East and South Africa, to the Pacific. Promised wages and opportunity, many instead found backbreaking work in fields and mines, in climates and conditions that did not care about their hopes. The roots of empire, Colombo to Durban, Calcutta to Trinidad, Hong Kong to Vancouver, were traced in coal smoke and human footsteps. From the deck of a crowded steamship, the future must have felt both frightening and impossible to imagine. The ocean around you was endless, your whole life shrinking behind you until it was nothing but memory. Ahead, a name you might barely know, spoken in a language not your own. The constant throb of the engines beneath your feet reminded you that this journey, whatever it was, could not simply be turned back by a change in the wind. Steam did not ask the weather for permission. Not every passenger on these ships was poor, of course. Some traveled in fine cabins with polished brass rails and white tablecloths in the dining room. Merchants, colonial officers, missionaries, all crossing the oceans to manage, defend, or expand the far-flung edges of empire. They wrote letters home about exotic lands, about new markets, and opportunity. From their viewpoint, steam had shrunk the world into something manageable, a network of ports and coaling stations, of routes and schedules that could be planned and controlled. But if they looked over the rail at the lower decks, if they listened to the languages spoken there, they would have seen another story unfolding, a story of dislocation, of families torn apart, of lives bent to serve distant factories and foreign crowns. Steamships did more than move people and goods. They rewrote time itself. Just as railways had imposed order on the land timetables and standard time zones, synchronized clocks and carefully measured minutes, steamships did the same to the sea. Maritime companies boasted about reliable crossings, 12 days, not somewhere between 3 weeks and 3 months. The oceans, once unpredictable and wild in the imagination, became part of a global schedule pinned to office walls in London, Paris, New York, and beyond. A bale of cotton could be grown in India, shipped by rail to a port, loaded onto a steamer, and carried to a British textile mill in a fraction of the time it once took. Tea leaves picked on a hillside in Ceylon or Sri Lanka might be brewed in a London parlor just weeks later. Coffee harvested in Brazil, rubber bled from trees in Malaya, copper pulled from African soil, all of it moved faster now, drawn into a web of trade that circled the planet again and again. But behind each neat line on a ledger book, each crate landed on a wharf, were hands and backs and stories. Plantation laborers rising before dawn, miners descending into dark, dangerous shafts, dock workers staggering under the weight of cargo. And behind them, the older rhythms of life farming, fishing, weaving, herding were disrupted or pushed aside by an economy they had not chosen. Empires, strengthened by steam and steel, liked to tell a comforting story about themselves, that they were bringing civilization, technology, and progress to the world. New railways, new ports, telegraph lines that allowed messages to flash along the same routes the ships traveled. There was some truth in that. A telegraph message sent from London could reach India in minutes instead of months. Vaccines, new medical ideas, and scientific knowledge sometimes traveled along those same paths. But so did laws that divided people by race, by language, by who was allowed to own land or vote or even walk in certain streets. So did the power to extract wealth, to decide what crops would be grown where, to push local industries aside and flood markets with cheap goods made in distant factories. Steam, for all its promise, became one of the strongest tools of control the world had ever seen. And yet, even in the shadows of empire, something else began to travel on the steamships and across the steel rails that spread inland from the ports: ideas. Workers from different regions, placed side by side on plantations or in mines, shared songs and stories, anger and hope. Newspapers, pamphlets, and letters carried news of strikes, protests, and rebellions. A worker in a dockside warehouse might hear about a labor movement from across the sea. A young student traveling to study in a colonial capital might return home with new visions of independence and self-rule. The same engines that powered the ships of empire also, slowly and quietly, powered the first movements against it. In harbor cities around the world, nights did not fall quite as dark as they once had. Lanterns burned along the docks, then gas lamps, then electric lights. The silhouettes of steamers came and went against that glow, some grand and gleaming, others rust-streaked and weary. Behind each arrival and departure, the world's inequalities deepened, the rich growing richer from trade and extraction, the poor pushed into harder and more uncertain lives. But carried along those same routes were letters between loved ones now separated by oceans. Remittances, small bundles of hard-earned money sent home by workers abroad to families waiting in villages they had left behind. Photographs, tiny tokens, the invisible threads of care and responsibility that tried to bridge the distances steam had made both smaller and, in some ways, more painfully real. If you stand in your imagination on a 19th century pier at dusk, you can almost see it all at once. To one side, a grand passenger liner preparing to cross from Europe to America, crowded with hopeful migrants seeking new lives, carrying trunks and bundles and memories of homes they might never see again. To another, a cargo steamer heavy with sugar and coffee and raw materials bound for factory cities, its cold bunkers full, its crew made up of men from 3 or 4 different continents, speaking to each other in fragments of shared languages. Farther along the waterfront, Smaller coastal steamers shuttle between islands, connecting tiny ports that once felt truly remote. Above them, gulls wheel and cry, and from time to time the deep, echoing call of a ship's whistle rolls out over the water like a challenge to the old silence of the sea. The age of steam did not erase the ocean's mystery or its danger. Storms still sank ships. Icebergs still tore open hulls. Engines failed. Fires broke out. But in the minds of the people who built empires, the sea no longer felt like a barrier. It was a highway, one they believed they owned. Lying in your quiet room tonight, with the world outside softened by darkness, it can feel very far away. The heave of a steamer on an open ocean, the grit of cold dust, the creak of ropes as they strain with the weight of distant goods. And yet, the echoes of that time reach right into the present, into the labels on your clothes, the origins of the food on your plate, the global routes of shipping containers and tankers that still follow the old paths traced by coal-fired ships long ago. The Industrial Revolution did not stop at factory doors or city limits. It spread across seas, reshaped coastlines, and wrapped the earth in trade and power. It made the world closer and less equal. It brought opportunity and suffering, invention and exploitation, wonder and grief, all tangled together in the smoke above the water. As the waves slide endlessly under the hulls of those long-ago steamers in your mind's eye, and their distant whistles fade into the dark, you can hold both truths at once: that steam helped connect families, spread knowledge, and shrink the planet, and that it also deepened the wounds of conquest, labor, and loss. Some stories of the Industrial Revolution are told only in numbers: tons of coal, miles of track, volume of trade. But beneath those numbers are the quieter stories of people standing at ship rails, watching the shore recede, not knowing where history is carrying them. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you are closer to them than you might think, another person lying awake, listening to the faint machinery of a restless world, wondering what it all means and where it is all going next. And somewhere, out there in the darkness between continents, an old steamship you'll never see keeps crossing the ocean in your imagination, its engines beating steadily, its lights glowing softly against the vast night, carrying with it all the weight of an age that changed the world forever. There's a moment late at night when your room is dim and the world outside has gone mostly quiet, when a soft mechanical sound keeps you company. Maybe it's the low whir of a fan, the gentle buzz of a fridge, the distant rush of traffic like a far-off ocean, a glow from a screen, a tiny charging light. Even when we feel alone, we're rarely far from the quiet heartbeat of our machines. Those sounds are not accidents of the present, they're echoes. They come from engines that first turned in smoky workshops, from factories that lit up the night with burning coal, from rails laid in straight lines across fields and forests, from steamships that dared to cross oceans on a schedule. The industrial age might seem like an old photograph, now sepia-toned, all waistcoats and soot, but it never really ended. It just changed shape, slipped into wires and circuits, into apps and algorithms, into the invisible systems that guide our days. If you listen closely, the modern world still speaks with an industrial accent. Think about an ordinary day, one that doesn't feel particularly special. You wake up to an alarm. Maybe you check your phone before you even sit up. Time already feels like it has you on a leash: work, school, buses, meetings, deadlines, notifications. That feeling, that tightness of time, is one of the deepest echoes of the industrial age. Before factories, many people's lives followed the sun and the seasons. Work rose and fell with the harvest, the weather, the length of the day. But factories needed something else: regularity, precision, predictable hours. Bells rang workers in and out. Clocks ruled over every shift. Over time, that strict factory time spilled out into the rest of life. School days shaped to mimic the workday. City routines cinched around trains and buses. Appointments, schedules, and calendars slicing time into neat blocks. You might not hear the factory whistle, but you still move to its rhythm. When you feel rushed, when you watch the minutes slide by on a screen and worry you're behind, you're feeling the distant tug of that earlier age. On the surface, the world today looks almost weightless. Music appears with a tap. Messages cross oceans in a heartbeat. Photos move from one side of the planet to the other before you've even finished your coffee. It's easy to believe we've left smokestacks behind. But behind almost every digital moment, there's something very old-fashioned: a factory. Instead of rows of clattering looms, there are rows of humming servers in windowless buildings. Instead of coal smoke, there's the faint heat of data centers cooled by giant fans and chilled water. Instead of train timetables, we have fiber optic cables and satellite links. When you stream a movie, that video is stored on physical drives in real buildings, powered by real electricity. Order something online. A massive warehouse, an upgraded factory floor, whirs into motion with conveyor belts, scanners, and workers on carefully timed shifts. Scroll social media. Complex algorithms determine what you see, optimized like old production lines, but for your attention instead of cloth or steel. The logic is the same. Break tasks into smaller parts, move them faster, and organize people and machines so that very little time is wasted. The vocabulary is new. The heartbeat is familiar. Walk through a big city at night if you ever get the chance, and you'll feel it. That low, constant energy, like the city itself is breathing. Lights burn in office towers. Trucks move along highways at 3 o'clock. Planes pass overhead like bright insects. Even the quietest corner is linked to something moving somewhere else. This restless energy grew from railways and factories, ports and shipyards. Once, cities boomed because trains stopped there, because coal was near, because factories clustered together and families followed the work. Today, we talk about tech hubs and financial centers instead of mill towns and steel cities. But the shape is the same. People gather where the jobs are. Housing bends and strains around demand. Rent rises where opportunity concentrates. Some neighborhoods shine, others are left in the shadow. Traffic jams, crowded buses, long commutes. These are the daily side effects of a world built to feed great industrial and post-industrial machines of work and trade. The smokestacks may have gone, but the pattern of life they set in motion still shapes where people live, how long they travel, and how tired they feel when they finally come home. The industrial age created incredible wealth, but it didn't share it evenly. Some people owned mines, railways, and factories. Many others worked long hours for low pay, breathing dust and fumes, their bodies worn down before their time. Today, the scenery has changed: cleaner offices, glowing screens, clever machines, but some of the old questions linger stubbornly. Who gains the most from faster production and global trade? Who does the hardest, most exhausting work? Who makes the things and who mainly uses them? The clothes you wear, the phone you use, the food you eat, Many of these pass through long chains of labor that stretch across continents. Someone mines the metals. Someone assembles the devices. Someone packs the boxes in warehouses. Someone delivers it to your door. Factories that used to stand in the heart of industrial cities have, in many cases, moved elsewhere, often to countries where wages are lower and rules about safety or pollution are weaker. The work didn't vanish, it just went out of sight. In that way, the industrial age didn't end. It spread out, threading its way through ports, highways, container ships, and warehouses. It's quieter to those who benefit most. It's not quiet at all to those whose bodies still bear the weight. Coal smoke once darkened the skies over 19th century cities. People wiped soot from their windowsills and coughed on their way to work. At the time, it felt like a local problem, bad for the lungs, bad for the view. Few imagined that the true bill would come due much later in the air and water of an entire planet. Burning coal, oil, and gas to power factories, steamships, trains, and later cars and planes released staggering amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. What began as a way to spin more cloth, smelt more iron, and move more goods became, over generations, a slow rewriting of Earth's climate. Today, when we talk about rising temperatures, stronger storms melting ice, strained ecosystems, we are hearing some of the loudest, harshest echoes of that first great leap into industrial energy. And even now, our servers, ships, trucks, and power plants continue the story, burning fuel to sustain the lifestyles that industrialization made possible. Solar panels and wind turbines are, in a strange way, a response from the future to a decision made in the past. We chose coal once. What do we choose now? There's another, more subtle echo of the industrial age that lives inside the devices you use every day. The dream of making work automatic. The first factories tried to make machines that could spin and weave faster than human hands. Later, new machines drilled, cut, assembled, and sorted. Every task that could be broken down into repeatable steps was a candidate for mechanization. Today, many of those steps are not physical ones, but mental. Sorting emails, recommending videos, translating languages, recognizing faces in photos. Software runs through these tasks the way early machines ran through rows of thread. The idea is the same. If a pattern can be learned, it can be repeated at great speed. You can feel this when your phone seems to guess what you'll type next, or when a website seems to know what you might want to buy, watch, or listen to. It's both fascinating and unsettling. Behind that smooth experience lie questions that sound, once more, like the 19th century echoing into the present. If a machine can do this work, what happens to the people who used to do it? Who owns the machines, the data, the systems? Who is being watched, measured, and optimized, and for whose benefit? The tools have changed. The questions not as much. The industrial age isn't just out there in factories, cities, and networks. It lives in quieter places too, inside your habits, your expectations, even your sense of self. When you feel guilty for not being productive enough, that's an echo. The old idea that a person's value is tied to output. When you feel you must always be reachable, always responsive, always busy, that's another echo. The rhythm of continuous work, reshaped into the constant ping of messages. When rest feels like a luxury instead of a right, when slowness feels like failure, the ghost of the factory clock is at your shoulder. And yet, something else has grown alongside all that pressure. the ability to look back and ask questions. Do we want our lives to be ruled entirely by speed and efficiency? Can we keep the gifts of the industrial age, medicine, comfort, connection, without repeating all of its harm? What does it mean to live well in a world built on old machines and new ones, on past decisions and present choices? These are not questions with simple answers, but they are signs of a different kind of progress, not faster, but wiser, maybe. As you sit here now, wherever you are surrounded by the descendants of steam and iron. The chair you sit on, the clothes you wear, the lights above you, the device in your hand, the network that carries these words to you, all are part of a world that the first inventors, engineers, and workers of the industrial age helped to shape. You owe much to them, and also, in a way, you owe them a response. Because you stand at a point in time they could not imagine, a moment when we can see, with clearer eyes, both the miracles and the damage their age set in motion. You can feel the echoes, and you can decide how loudly they will ring into the future. You might choose to support cleaner forms of energy, to pay attention to where your things come from, to value rest and care in a world obsessed with output, to create, to repair, to share, instead of always consuming more. These are small choices, perhaps, but then, so were many of the first sparks that lit the industrial age and improved engine here, a clever machine there, a rail laid a little further, a ship built a little stronger. Small choices can steer great forces given time. Tonight, when you finally set your device aside, listen for a moment. The faint hum in the walls, the distant car, the low breath of the city or town or village around you. Beneath it all, if you really pay attention, you can almost hear the long, low murmur of centuries of machines, of factories and furnaces, of whistles and wheels and wires. The industrial age is not just a chapter in a book. It's the floor you stand on, but the story isn't done. You are living in the unwritten pages that come after. And somewhere, in the soft glow of your room, you hold a quiet kind of power, the ability to decide what kind of echo you will leave behind for whoever listens. Years from now, in the hush of their own late-night world,